Welcome everyone to the August 2024 Talga Group Quarterly Investor Webinar. Today we'll hear a presentation from Talga's Managing Director and Founder, Mark Thompson, about the group's recent updates. Mark will speak on his presentation until approximately 11 a.m. Following this presentation, there will be a Q&A session. So thank you to everyone who submitted a question ahead of time. We had quite a few. You can also submit a question during the presentation through the Q&A function on Zoom. As I said, we've received quite a few questions, so if we don't get to yours, feel free to get in contact with us after the webinar at info@talgagroup.com. I now welcome Mark Thompson, Managing Director of Talga Group. Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Alex. Hope everyone can hear me okay, and welcome on this fine August day here in Western Australia and to wherever you are. I'm just going to get my little stopwatch going. Okay, let's get stuck into it. For those of you new to the company, fully integrated battery materials and technology company based essentially around natural graphite. So we can blend, we can use silicon, we can use other materials, but fundamentally we're about using natural graphite as the best way to make battery materials, and we like being the battery business, which I'll talk about soon. Just to sum up also, it's worth just pausing for a second about what the group is, because it's not just the project. We have technologies that impact many different minerals in the battery supply chain. We specialize in having super low emissions, and we're in the strategic mineral supply chain, which I know is very commonly, over talked about these days, about including lots of different minerals, but natural graphite in particular has been recognized within Europe and America as being of critical and strategic importance. Being a European jurisdiction has its pros and cons, but we think that the pros obviously outweigh the cons. It's not an accident we're there. Very stable jurisdiction. And allows us direct access to customers in that region. The fundamentals of low cost in that area for power. So there's no arguing that Scandinavian countries and the Nordics are fantastic for power-hungry industries, of which battery materials and battery making is one. And we own now a substantial IP portfolio because we own all our own technology, but also the accreditations, the ISO accreditations we're getting for automotive supply, and we're separately getting in auto industry certifications as well. There's a bunch of studies. You can see the business cases for the main graphite anode project at different stages of expansion. You cannot see them yet on the silicon and recycling, but you can sort of see the growing business cases for them. The finance for our lead project of Vittangi is very, very well advanced and underwritten by 150 million euros of debt financing, cornerstone by the EIB, the European Investment Bank, and the rest of that partnership for our target is all complete. And yeah, we have so essentially great people, great assets, great technology. That's, it's bigger than just the project is the point. So let's just cut straight into something about that gets missed by particularly the media in the last 6 months, which is that every year since lithium-ion batteries really got going into EV batteries in particular, but now also ESS and 3C, you have a seasonal drop at the beginning of the year. Every year, as you can see on this chart, Q1 every year is lower than Q4. So people who don't realize this see that as this, oh no, EVs are dying or demand is great. It's not changing. Battery sales continue up. If EV sales are low in some jurisdictions, they're up in others. They're nearly 50% of the Chinese market. They may be down to 10% in the US. They go up and down depending. The bottom line though is they all have lithium-ion batteries in them that they didn't have a few years ago. So you had you've now got continual growth. The numbers are in for the first half, over 20% year-on-year growth. Does that sound like a reflection to you? Does that sound like a EVs are over type story, right? If the EVs are down, the domestic storage goes through the roof. So there's the 3C market used to just be phones and laptops. Now it includes drones. Now it includes robots and things that have actually got nearly car-sized batteries in them. If full EV sales are down somewhere, but you've got a growth in hybrids, but the hybrid battery sizes are growing. So there used to be 10, 15, 20 kilos of graphite in them. Now there's 30 or 40 kilos in the hybrids, right? It's still lithium-ion battery industry, which we sell into. That's why we moved into the graphite business originally, was to get access to that growth profile over time. In this recessionary world, what other businesses maybe outside AI tech are growing at 20+% year on year? That's why we want to be in it. So that story actually hasn't changed. It's fundamentally correct. And I predict that what you'll see in the media over the next 6 months is all this, oh, gee, surprisingly good numbers coming out of the EV industry in different places and things like this. So it goes up and down depending on local subsidies and tariffs and things like that. But overall, you've got growth of a new industry. Remember that it's only 10 years since the first gigafactory was built in Nevada was Tesla. Since then, you've had growth nearly 3 times. Every 3 or 4 years, you had 3 times growth in the overall sector around the world, and it's compounding. So it's still early days is the point. And there's no doubt the data's in. So just take all the stuff you read around the internet and in newspapers, if you still look at those things, as with a grain of salt. What does that mean? Well, the global graphite market is about 2 million tons per year, roughly, about split half synthetic and natural. That was the industrial market. Now you've got batteries come along only 10 plus years ago as a brand new growth area that didn't exist before. And in the next 5 years or so, you're going to be looking for 10 million tons of graphite just for the battery market as anode. That's not the precursor materials. That's the final anode product. So that means you're probably going to need somewhere in the region of, just guessing, but to make 11 million tons of anode, that means you're going to be going through 20 million tons of standard industrial flake, not for Talga, but for other companies. They have to, basically produce about twice the amount of what's in anode to start the process. So 20 million tons a year. So it's a big growing market. You don't have to believe in hockey stick charts and all that. As I showed you previously, the data's in, it continues growing, and this is dead in the middle of that. And we're well placed. We're obviously got direct access to Europe. We have great access to the States as well. And even we're getting quite a lot of inquiries back into Asia. So we're close to the main markets is the point as a company, okay? We're not spread out. And the latest, I guess, is the Critical Raw Materials Act going into force just a few months ago, which is designed to facilitate speed of developments and things like that obviously have held things up over the years, including us. There's also new tariffs coming out on Chinese EVs that are emerging in Europe. There's also actually been tariffs already on the imports of graphite for certain industrial uses. So not for batteries so far, although it wouldn't surprise me to see that coming, but for the synthetic graphite anode industry for steel smelting and things like that, they've actually already introduced tariffs against Chinese companies up to 100% in some cases. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. The Chinese export permits, which gave everyone a bit of a kick late last year, certainly raised graphite in the consciousness of the car companies. They haven't really done much with them. There hasn't been any real restrictions on exports, but that gate is there and does get threatened around these tariff discussions going on. And in America, obviously you've got some exemptions there from what were going to be very strict rules. They've recognised they currently have really no capacity to bring on qualified material that's ready to go right now. But in the next couple of years, that changes. They'll go pretty hard on that, I imagine, and they've already introduced new tariffs. So the point is that there is a geopolitical wind behind graphite going forward as a structural and strategic and critical part of battery supply chains, not just for EVs, but also for those microgrids and stationary storage, but also for military purposes. There's more and more electrification of just everything. Every single thing that moves is now moving into that largely, if they can, because you have very low temperature signatures and you can have very low sound signatures and things like that with propulsion. So there's all sorts of good reasons why you can see that the essential premise is that eventually you take graphite, which is 99% through China at the moment as anode. You have to have new supply chains elsewhere in the world, and Talga is going to be one of the biggest and best of those. Dust point. So let's look at the project. Let's go to North Sweden, far away Scandinavia, where we have the integrated project, which is the mine upstate, as it were, near Vittangi. It's next to road, rail, power, grid power is hydro and nuclear are on that grid. Surprisingly to me, the nuclear was cheaper than the hydro, but in either way, you've got both sustainable and or renewable energy choices, and the contracts for those are all being negotiated at the moment. You have direct road and rail access to customers, both customers that are within Sweden, but also directly within France, Germany, Poland, Hungary. You can actually truck material to them if it's faster than shipping, and it usually is. We have the stage 1 project is to produce just under 20,000 tonnes of anode, and we've just recently shown some studies that show we can make up to just over 400,000 tonnes of anode precursor, meaning the material we would feed into the refinery, which is being further studied, and the results of that will come out later this year. But that's from only 2 million tonnes per annum of mining. So about a 20 times output in anode production is possible without actually another ton of resources or anything being proven up past what we already have. So it's a very significant resource. It's a very significant technology and plan that is coming together up there. On the cost side, this is showing that both for our small-scale production and lower cost in large-scale production, we have got potentially the lowest operating costs in the world, definitely in the lowest quartile, potentially in the lowest decile. This includes Chinese production as well. So people will often say, how can you do that as a Western company in a Western country? Surely you can't actually do that. But it's because not only is our deposit very high grade, sort of averaging 23%, but it has in parts up to 50%. But the fact is that all of the flakes are very small battery size. So it's 100% fine size flake, of which, because the flakes are all the same size, and with the way we've been able to refine our process technology to having very, very low losses, means almost all of it turns into anode, and we have super low energy costs. And of course, we're vertically integrated with no big transport and things in between. So when you put all that together, that allows us to have a globally competitive cost. Now, are we competitive against a subsidized China that runs at 0% profit? That's, we're close, but you can't necessarily kill that off. But definitely we're in good shape against Western producers in reality. So that's from an operating cost point of view. So let me just refresh everyone about the permitting before we get into questions later on that. So let's go the easy one first, which is the refinery. So mid-22, we put in the environmental permit after doing obviously all the studies and so forth. We got the building permits and the environmental permit approved for that a year later. So just think about that. That's a greenfields chemical site for purification and other. So you've got acids, you've got caustics, you've got reagents having to be done to top class standards. You've got chemical storage and everything. And that was actually permitted within a year. So don't tell me that you can't get anything done in Europe and or Sweden. In that case, that was not actually a pre-permitted chemical park, which we would have loved actually, but it was an industrial park that the government had developed, but it really was a greenfield site. We've had to do everything from scratch there, and we've achieved that. So the refinery is fully permitted. It can be built any day, it can be operated. We've already done some work on it, and now it needs connecting up to the mine. Now on the mine, obviously we had a multi-year, a very, very thorough environmental process being developed and submitted, which went in around mid-20. And in mid-23, so admittedly 3 years sounds like a long time, but for a greenfields mine site, so this is not a historic mine site. It's not something brand new, although there was some minor mining there back in the 80s by LKAB, and it was approved. It was approved in a 200-page decision that specifically said wording to the effect of, do not try and appeal this because this is a very thorough decision. It was appealed by some local parties, and their appeals were rejected. Now, in Sweden, there's a 2-stage appeals process for everything. So this is not abnormal. So you're allowed to appeal, and that goes to an appeals court. The appeals court didn't even want to hear, I'm sounding a bit political now, sorry. The appeals court rejected them because they said there's nothing new here, there's nothing special. That hasn't already been decided in the environmental permit, so they rejected them without hearing them. That decision can then be appealed, and that's the one that's up in the Supreme Court process now. where it's all lined up and they go through things sequentially. So that's what's being decided on at the moment in the Supreme Court, is they're not going through the project. They're going through, was the decision to reject the appeals. Okay, and they're not even going through them. We don't actually know where they're at because they're just in a line. They're in a queue coming through, and we're awaiting that decision, of course, with excruciating varieties of patience from everyone. At best, they say that the rejection of the appeals was lawful and fine. That's the end of it. Okay, then that environmental permit goes into force, and everything else the dam bursts and all sorts of other things comes through. If they uphold the appeals, then what it means is we have to go back to the lower court, which is the appeals court, and the appeals get heard, and they'll get dealt with there. Of which we would be confident that you would also get a similar decision to the environmental permit, which was granted. So you're in this sort of you're in this process. That's the way they do it. It's been it's been a year and a half roughly since the environmental thing was granted, and yeah, it's really, really difficult to deal with. However, it is not abnormal for a greenfields mining project in somewhere in Europe to undergo this process, but at least it is it's rigorous, it's independent, doesn't get played with. But unfortunately, that also means you can't get priorities and stuff as well. And I can speak to that. I'll speak to more details about this process and what we know and what we don't know in question time, probably. FEED study was done, front-end engineering and design, if you don't know. So what we have managed to do is the DFS was from 21. We need to refresh it. We found all sorts of fantastic savings. Nearly a quarter of that power needed for the entire project was able to be saved. We've streamlined less purification and less anode equipment, which has helped a lot with various capex and things like that. The capex, of course, increased at the same time as getting a more accurate, but it was a very modest increase. Most people that have updated their studies over the last 2 or 3 years have had really big blowouts in capex. This was seen as a big success to keep it down where it was, and the team did a great job on doing that. That is hard. And then we've basically got a timeline now of 18 to 24 months to build the project from the financial decision, which of course is tied into having full title granted on the mine to sort of put it all together. And in that process, we couldn't say much detail, and we still can't, but we did actually identify ways to potentially expand production from that existing design that we just couldn't quantify. Well, we could quantify internally, we couldn't quantify externally to the stage at that point. But yeah, it was a really big success from the team here and all of our contractors and the teams all across Europe to get that result, to be honest. And that sets us up then for talking about financing, which hasn't really changed. We announced that we'd finalised our debt group, which is essentially the EIB have board approved 150 million euros of a target, which is so that's about what's roughly 2 to 3 times that amount. We've also got applications, so that's done, or the group is decided, and there's a range of commercial banks and some export credit agencies in the package. So that's being kept on foot, awaiting this decision. We've also got an application in for 70 million euros in grant funding. That's a true grant funding, not these complicated loans that are getting offered by various government agencies around the world. And then importantly, we are either in discussions with now or have had discussions with groups that also are similarly waiting on some of these key milestones around permitting about strategic investment, both in the company and at a project level. So we're just reviewing what the options are for that, with a view to maximizing the exposure to profits for Talga shareholders, but also minimizing any negative impacts as much as possible. So we're taking all that very carefully and very strategically, with full knowledge of the difficulties of those situations where you may need capital to build the project, and don't do something that will damage the company too much along the way, which of course I'll also relate back to recent capital raisings and things like that in question time. So anyway, it's very well advanced now. And a lot of that work was, I mean, last year in a way, you could say that a lot of the efforts of the company, it's very expensive, to be honest, to organize that sort of finance and do these sorts of level of detailed studies. We did all this from equity funding, obviously, and yeah, it's very, very advanced. So it's almost like pre-project capital in a way. But yeah, that phase is over now. So now the phase is moving on to other things. And that's why, you know, our burn rates decreased quite a lot, as you would have seen in the quarterly report, cash balance. In the meantime, we're talking obviously with customers that are global in scale, have good knowledge of what their upcoming projects are and where they'll be and what's really going on in their world, not what's public, and even what their CEOs aren't saying while they try and maybe squeeze some finance out of various government agencies and things like that. So anyway, what we did was we went back, said, look, to underpin larger production in future. So we've done a scoping study on Niska, which is an expansion. So taking us from 120,000 tons per year of mining to 400,000 tons of mining. And we looked at the ore body and said, well, what would be the ideal development for that area? What would you do if you just weren't constrained by the battery market and thinking about that? What's the ore body do naturally? Like what fits? And they came up with these options where essentially you have a small starter pit, you throw the other pits away, it increases your head grade. To be honest, you have a quicker transition underground, it's backfilled, so your tailings go down there, you have smaller tailings requirements. And you have this underground development, which is almost identical to the existing iron ore mines in the area, which are all underground, similar width ore body, similar length, you know, similar shape. So the mining equipment, the mining technologies, everything from blasting techniques to maintenance to air supply, fan supply, underground crushing equipment, you name it, it's all available in that area because they already use it there. So yeah, so we looked at that and came up with panels of 600,000 tons at a time. So you put 3 of them together and you're doing about 2 million tons per annum of milling, which would produce about 425,000 tons of con, which would be able to go down to refinings. And that's based on our existing resource of 35 million tons. So there's some good aspects to this in the way that essentially this would, it doesn't really replace the Niska plant at the moment, but it may integrate with it. It depends on exactly, you know, there's been a lot of rule changes lately to improve permitting speed. There's been changes about whether environmental permits have to be done before mining permits are granted, that sort of thing. So we're looking to integrate this as we can, but certainly we see this as a very permittable, still very low impact expansion. And what it really speaks to is the ore body can spit out a huge amount of anode material potential from not mining that much. So I see other people proposing to mine 20, 30, 40 million tons per year to get numbers that are even less than this of this material. So again, it's just showing a natural fit for this thing as a really world-class ore body for making anodes, not industrial products. I like the idea of this being a very long-term deposit in the area. Am I going for time? Sorry. Okay. Look, 35 million tons out of a 240 to 350 million ton JORC exploration target. So as you can see on the left here too, that's a shot of our trial mine that we finished a couple of years ago. That site's all in rehabilitation now. But you can see the landscape there through which the graphite pops up. And you can see here on the right, this is the shells or the wireframes of the ore body. We cut out areas that would get close to anything like rivers or roads or things that you'd want to avoid. So we took those out, and it's quite restricted in depth as well. So it's actually a fairly average point of view. This is from rock chipping, drilling, seismic, geophysics. It's actually based on real data. It's not just, gee, there's the graph, there's the mineral units there. It's actually got some rigor behind it. So that's just, we're going to leave the Vittangi project now. I'm not addressing our other graphite projects in the area like Jalkanen and Ratiyavi, but needless to say, we've got this incredible assets, the largest and highest grade resources in Europe. And actually on a contained graphite scale, if we drilled out, if we spent $20 million, $30 million drilling it all out, then you would probably have one of the largest contained resources in the world, which at these grades and with its ability to make anode, which is ginormous. And that's not really the point. The point's about, margins and profitability. But at those grades in this area, yeah, once we're established, this thing should be able to grow extremely well. And if you look at the gross revenue from that sort of volume, which if you're going into a 10 million tonne market in around 2030, if you're doing up around these sorts of numbers in anode, you're obviously doing still only a small section of the market, but you should go relate that back to our DFS to look at the way that could be potentially economic. Just a word on lithium, because during the quarter we announced a partnership with SQM, and this just wraps up what has been a journey on our greenfields discovery of lithium in northern Sweden there. We're a first mover, so we've managed to get 270 square kilometers. It's all ours. We got some rock chips just under 2%, and these are in these large flat pegmatite sheets that are poking out for up to 400 meters and sometimes even more. Over 50 k's of strike now, we've found different pegmatites. It's very, very early stage, very, very early. It's totally greenfields discovery. And it's fantastically located. It's east of the mountain. It's just southeast of Gällivare, where you've got the big iron ore mines and the biggest copper mine open cut copper mine in all of Europe. So you've got fantastic power, road, rail. So it's just a great place to operate. SQM came in their sole funding exploration. They have a right to spend 19 million US to earn 70% of the project in stages. Talga is managing it in the first instance, and we receive fees for that. And we had also, in the event that the project goes to FID, we'd receive development bonuses and things like that. So Talga can choose to support its 30% or dilute over time. So what's exciting about this is, like SQM, they could have gone to anyone else in Europe. They didn't go to Germany or Czech or Republic or Portugal or Spain. They chose Talga, and they actually spent nearly 6 months doing DD on this project before we entered into the agreement. They've been on the ground, and I was there with them, so they've sampled it, they've done their work. So yeah, we find it quite significant. We find them fantastic to work with, fantastic technical team. Together, we can obviously look after them from a development point of view on the ground and support that. And we're looking forward to learning from them also about lithium exploration technology, the latest developments they can bring to bear. But importantly, just as a large, one of the largest producers of lithium in the world, we see this as a fantastic step together to establish a potential resource base or production base in Europe. So it may be this project or something else nearby, and we can work together on that. But yeah, we're just really thrilled. Great fit with our teams talking to each other, and field work starting pretty soon, actually, a couple of weeks. And just to wrap up, just want to remind people that everything you've seen here today, these are all our own photos, because it's all our own stuff. These are our people and stuff. There's not much stock photography that we ever use. We just try and make our own stuff look pretty good. But anyway, the important point is that we have a whole bunch of patents granted or in application, and we also have them they go from mining to processing, from purification to coating systems, to the silicon production and graphene production, different industrial products. So we're not massive patent junkies, but if you want to look around out there, our company owns what it's working with. And this is, it's not just from a feature point of view, it's also what are the benefits? Well, this is really attractive to car companies, right? They hate getting sued by people that are in their supply chain. They want to hear that you don't owe licensing rights to someone else. No one's going to have a dispute with you, even if it's false, because you just own everything. It's just, also your people are therefore better prepared to go into commercial production. So there's a bunch of benefits you get from owning your own technology. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it costs some money to do. And is it worth it? I believe so. The partnerships you end up with are higher quality, longer length, more in depth. It's more attractive to them. So yeah, it works on different levels. And you haven't been able to see this so much, because so much is done behind the scenes. But if you want to search, Google search for various items and things, you can. But from the point of view of the customers we've attracted in the past, like BASF, like Bosch, just so many great companies. And it's not just because you say, I can do this with one single test. It's like, well, actually, I really know how to do this. And it's attractive to them to get that sort of coverage. That's what they tell us. Okay, just also touch on a couple of developments. Recycling. So the Talnode C Recycle series. You can tell from that we're actually pretty confident about this working. In the past, black mass graphite from used batteries, not production scrap. Production scrap's easy, to be honest, because you just trim the edges off. The graphite's never been used. It's already 99.9%. You haven't put anything in it. If it gets trimmed off when they're making the anode sheets, and they're trimming the edges off and you get some graphite on it, you can just wash it off. It's no big deal. And then you can reuse it for something, probably get it back into batteries. In the past, the black mass, though, where you've lithiated the anode and you've got all sorts of horrible chemical compounds forming at a very, very deep level, like atomically getting all the way in there and bonding with the graphite. It's been very hard to clean up. As a consequence, you've got tens of thousands, heading towards hundreds of thousands of tons of black mass that is half graphite by volume going to landfill and road base and stuff like that. So they don't know what to do with it. They can't sell it to an industrial market because the grades are funky or too low, but mostly it's too contaminated with stuff they don't want. So it doesn't really sort of figure anywhere. By using our purification technology, twisting it a little bit, but using the same one we've developed for natural anode, then we've been able to not only clean the material up, but actually reuse it, not for industrial purpose graphite like grease, but actually get it back into an anode. That is got some really good benefits to it. It provides for Talga another potential source of material. It provides for the customer a legislative tick for recycling and closed loop things, that the legislation that they're under, particularly in Europe, where the battery maker and the car maker are responsible for recycling. So currently, sure, they can find someone to take it for the copper and the aluminium and the lithium and the nickel and the cobalt. Who was going to take the graphite? Well, no one. No one's really doing much with it because that's a very specialized area. And remember that everyone's buying the graphite in from China. So there wasn't really necessarily graphite processes anywhere else like in Europe or North America. So yeah, it provides a potential growing source. Now, it can't really overtake what is the demand. So it still doesn't change the demand for the clean material, but there is good potential for a business with good margins where that material can be blended with your existing material and can slow down the necessary import of synthetic from the outside world. So once essentially what you're talking about is if you're currently buying synthetic and natural mixed in batteries in to say a continent, North America, for example, or in Europe, and then you're able to recycle some of that back out and mix it with new material like Talga's within Europe, then you need to import less. And so strategically, this is of interest as well. But the main thing is, I know it's not necessarily that. Everything to do with recycling doesn't seem that attractive to investors, I think, in many ways. But I think once we can publish some sort of business case on it, then it might change your mind. But certainly from a customer point of view, it's got really, really hard pull. Like it's a solution that they're into straight away. It's not a solution that's delivered from Asia and that they can't ship material back there. It doesn't make sense. It's got to be a local solution. So yeah, I think it's looking good. On silicon, also looking good, still behind the scenes a little bit, starting to get, I guess, more funding in the world. There's significant funding going to silicon anode companies. We make a product that's nearly 50% silicon. It's got about 5 times the energy density of graphite only. We buy in silicon and we mix it with our graphite and graphene in a special process. This has got granted patents in some parts of the world now on it. It's low cost and it's industrially scalable. We don't use silane gas. We don't use silane in liquid form either. We think that from a cost point of view and long-term sustainability point of view, this is a better way to go. We've got internal feasibilities that show this is fantastic material and fantastic economics on this material. Pilot plant has already been operating in Germany. We've very positive feedback from customers. We're trying to work out, we've been very close a few times to going to this site, that site. Maybe the government changed how much, if there was a fund or if there was a grant that was involved and things like that, and things have shuffled around. That's why we haven't sort of pushed the button on it yet. But yeah, we expect to sometime soon. So the beauty of this is it is a synergy, because any material that I guess, does fall out from the anode production system can end up as graphite in this system. Also, customers like having a range of anode products that they can get. The margins on this product can be very, very good, so we can sell it to similar customers. So it's just about growth. It's got all the good things you want that very few people can make. From what we've seen, it's a higher quality product than most make. So just overall, we think this is the lowest cost, most scalable way of doing the volumes that industry needs where they're going. It's not like a R&D project. Okay, Alex, what shall I do now? Shall I quit this screen to go to my head for question time?
Yep, sounds good. So yeah, thank you, Mark, for updating everyone on the group's activities through this presentation. Mark, if you just want to stop sharing your screen so we can see you properly, that'd be good. Perfect, thank you. Right, so now we're going to move into the Q&A portion of today's session. So thank you everyone who has submitted a question ahead of time or through the Q&A function on Zoom. So first question, Mark, regarding the Supreme Court review process, are you surprised at the length of time the process has taken?
Yes and no. I'm extremely disappointed by it, but if you think about the applications went in late last year, to be half a year later without having a decision is extremely disappointing, especially compared to the fact that the Supreme Court in public was showing that it should make decisions within months, a few months. So in where these laws came from, I'm not really sure, but the process they've set up certainly isn't working very well as far as speed goes, because the Supreme Court now handles basically everything: disputes over garden fences, who stole whose boat, or everything, all the way up to murders, serious things, immigration cases, you name it. Because the appeals process is allowed to be free, then everyone just puts in an appeal against everything, and the appeals then all end up in the Supreme Court, and that's why they only accept probably about 2% of them to actually getting decided on rather than kicked out. What will we say? So we share the disappointment, but at the same time, we have to respect this really independent process. It's not like some local council you can ring up and just go stomping around. The local government or the government can't really, of course, be seen to be interfering. It's independent. Do they have a system where they could take projects as a priority over someone else? That would be nice, but that's not the way they've chosen to run their society. They're saying, no, you're all equal in our eyes, and so you go through this queue system. There was a system to apply for priority, which at a certain time you could do, and we did, and that got rejected on the basis that the problem is everyone's applying for priority. So you're still in the same lineup with everyone, because there's no limitation to these things. So look, while it's frustrating, that is the system, and I guess we're closer to the end of it than the beginning now, right? So there is limitations on how long it takes. We're confident in the outcome. We've got reason to be confident in the outcome. But yeah, we didn't. You could say, I guess some of the questions are based around, well, shouldn't you know? Shouldn't you have organised something else? There's nothing else you can do. You're going to end up in it. You just got to go into it. We had a really good decision from the Environmental Court. We were probably a little bit, not tricked, but when the appeals got rejected really quickly in the first appeals court, that happened way quicker than we thought, way quicker than we'd modelled. And that probably made us maybe a bit more confident about that the Supreme Court would be the same. And it wasn't. So we probably, got a little bit tricked there, but there's nothing else. We've undertaken every single thing we can do. We've made the calls. We've made the personal pleas. We've done it at all levels. We've done everything we can, and there's really nothing else you can do. You're now in the end part of the process. So hopefully soon there'll be an increase in the speed of decisions as everyone comes back. They are making decisions now as well. But you've got to remember the Supreme Court isn't just like one group doing all these. There's like 30 or 40 judges. You can go to the website and see them all. They're all named, and they all specialise in different parts of different law. So anyway, look, the upshot is that it wasn't something you could model because you're not allowed to know what's in front of you, and you don't know the cases in front of you, whether they're going to be heard or not. If you're behind a case that they have to spend time on or not, and what judges are available and when, and who's away and who's on maternity leave and whatnot. So look, to us, it's extremely frustrating. You can think of a lot of ways that's better, but it is renowned for these delays. There's a lot of literature on it in government circles, but that's what we've got. At least now, we know it shouldn't be too far away on the basis of how far it's been extended. Importantly, just remember, they're not dealing with our project insofar as they're not arguing over the project. They don't have to address specific things about that. They're just addressing, was the rejection of the appeals lawfully done or not? Is there a case that they should be considered? That's what's being decided. So when it does reach them in the queue, we hope that there'll be a really quick resolution, and we hope that resolution will be sooner rather than later. But there is no guarantee. It could happen today. Could be, a few months from now. We don't actually know. We do know all we have is, we don't really have any information about where it's at in the process.
Thanks, Mark. Have you been in contact, or has Talga been in contact with the recently announced Green Acceleration Office that the Swedish government has recently announced?
Well, it's only just been set up. I don't know if it actually exists yet. We have pretty regular contact with all sorts of government agencies as they arise. I think, and this one will be no different. I think a couple of things are a little bit significant though about it is, one, that they're doing it because the government recognises that things are too slow. It's them saying we need to speed this up. So they've set up this agency to do that. Number two, I believe it's, so you could correct me here, but Minister Persson, is it Jonas Persson's on the board of it or running it? Anyway, this is the minister. Minister Persson was the one that was up at our refinery site helping do the sod turning. And he's been very outspoken about the need for more speed in permitting and development. So overall, I would just say, look, it's a good sign. It is a definite shift towards, it's more proactive towards getting things done and working. But if you can't change the legislation, you could say, oh, they're setting up a new committee. That's terrible. But actually, they're doing it. They're doing it to try and make better things happen, to try and put more pressure and do a faster changes than they could do otherwise through basic legislation, which would take longer. And the people involved, you could argue, have already been shown to be supportive of us and our goals. So no, I think it's a really good thing. So I think we have reason between that and the Critical Raw Materials Act changes, coming in recently, that we've got reason to be hopeful that things will go faster, for expansions and new permits versus what's happened in the past.
Great, thanks. Just briefly moving on, we had a few questions regarding the recent institutional placement. Would you be able to take us through why the capital raise was initiated at the discount that it was?
At the discount it was. Well, yeah, obviously. Okay, so the fact is that I think a couple of days, essentially, there's a bigger context for this, which is like, why now at all? Well, and why didn't you raise money before? And why didn't you raise? So hindsight's always 2020. So back when we raised it at when the share price was high and we did an institutional placement at about like $1.45, $1.50, and that was done very cleanly, a larger amount of money. We did a smaller amount of money in an SPP at $1, which we all felt was really, really cheap. But because it was cheap, we just threw it to shareholders only. We did no institutional placement, and the conditions were that we felt that would be the last thing we'd need before getting the permit, and also related to that, other commercial deals that people would want. So major milestones were probably going to be, we expected them over the next couple of quarters, and that should have been fine. It did not end up that way. Why? Because of the court delays predominantly, plus then around that, you've had a really bad macro market. So you've had an absolutely shocking downturn in investment in battery minerals equities, basically. So lithium became this proxy for the whole industry, which is sort of crazy considering it was coming off, all-time stupid highs. But anyway, this sort of infected everything, and everything was going down the tubes. There was a perception that we would become raised. Obviously, we were decreasing our burn rate was decreasing naturally anyway from what stage we're at. But at the same time, from the previous quarterlies, people projecting things, you were getting shorts and things set up around that. So there was a lot of pressure, and there was really no way to short circuit that, because logic wasn't affecting anything, and the market was just getting away. So we got down to, we were 42 cents. The placement was done at 38. I think the day before the placement, the stock jumped from 42 to, what was it, 48, 49 or something like that. So it makes the discount on the last close look big. In reality, on the VWAPs and stuff, it wasn't that big, because the shares had been getting down into the 40s for a while. So look, we did the smallest amount we could, was actually done very well, very cleanly, very short, was supported by some of the largest amounts of it were from existing shareholders, and some new funds. And we're now also going to do the same issue to existing shareholders via prospectus, what's called a prospectus plan. It's a bit like an SPP, but with a prospectus, so that everyone can say, well, okay, at this level, you can have a shot. And we believe this is more than enough now to budget us through what will be these major milestones everyone wants. So as usual, we're doing managing things as best as we can in really horrible times. It's not exactly a boom year, and you don't always get to choose these things and timings. It's always just a balance of risks. So yeah, don't know if that answers that question fully, but yeah, it's not like we wait around and then move when things are terrible. It's something you can have reason to believe that you're going to be able to deliver various milestones and be able to do things at higher prices, or even not do them at all. Have a strategic investment or something that's going to means that you don't have to. But in this market, not just in the equities market, but in the global market, even amongst customers, they're coming into summer, and the whole year has just been a lot of people on hold, worried about North American policy and stuff like that. So yeah, everything slowed down to the point. So we've got to do something. We've got to run the business, and you don't want us to slow down to nothing, I'm sure. So yeah, this is a very, very modest thing that we did in the best circumstances we could. It's a typical thing. No one's happy. Everyone's unhappy at times like this, and we just are. We're not. No one's happy, but we are providing hopefully some really good value in making this available via an SPP type function, but also with an option issue as well that we're considering doing, which will also, we hope, be of strong value to shareholders. And that's as good as we can do at times like this. And it's definitely enough, as I said, for us to feel more confident of getting those milestones over the line.
Thanks, Mark. With these loyalty options, why are you considering them as an action?
I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say. It turns out to be rules, regulations. Means we can't say that we're definitely doing it. We have to say that we're considering them and looking at them, which is what we're doing. We obviously raised it because we would like to do it, and that's about all I can say. But that's why we have to use that legal language around considering. Is at the time it's not able to be put out that it's definite. It's just quirks of legal wording about things.
No, fair enough. Moving on. How have offtake agreements been progressing?
Yeah, good, actually. It's been expanding. So there's some public, there's a lot more that are not public under NDAs and various discussions. There's probably been a strong shift from the battery makers to autos themselves, trying to take more control of the supply chain, particularly in anodes. So you've seen a few deals done around the world with a few battery makers combined with autos. And yeah, definitely we're seeing the same thing. It's very hard, obviously, to pin down an offtake start date when you're still waiting on your line of sight for your start of construction. So yeah, that's the main thing. But so it's difficult to commit to a production timeline. But yeah, the EVA plant's been a wonderful asset. We talked about it in the quarterly, that being able to provide megatons of samples from our production from the trial mines. People forget we were doing like 60-ton, 80-ton samples through toll concentrators, purifying that material, running it through an EVA plant, which is a qualification plant. It's not a pilot. Big samples going out to lots of customers in their processes now. So it's been with the accreditation that comes with that, being able to be audited by the auto companies and the cell makers. But yeah, I'd say it's fair that there's been a lot of flux in the first half of the year, whether it's battery makers, the autos are quite desperate. The cell makers are trying to juggle what their commitments are versus the autos. Everyone's facing new regulations starting up, either IRA up, IRA down in America, and various things in the Europe as well. We had the European Commission getting re-elected or new elections recently, and that's all been put to bed now. So yeah, I think just overall, it's good. It just can't go as usual, can't be committed to without that definitive start of construction. But we're seeing significant demand continue to grow, including from Asia, actually back into Asia, which has been a bit of a surprise for me, meaning that other Asian battery markets are looking for non-Chinese supply. So that's the big theme really around the world.
Great, thanks. Speaking of expansions, what other permits have been initiated or obtained to initiate the expansion of production?
So we've got an exploitation permit application in for Niska that's outstanding. That's been in for a while now. The mines department, as it were, we'll call them Berestar, and the rules changed, but previously you used to get a mining lease first, then you put in your environmental later. Then it got changed, so you had to put environmental in first before you get mining, which is what we're in now. And now it's changed back again. We've had that exploitation permit in for Niska. We've got various permits underway, everything from power lines to various roads and other infrastructure and logistical things you need around it. Again, down at the refinery, you've got things like transport of chemicals, things like that. A whole bunch of different permits have been gained already for different parts of the business at different parts of the time. But that's what's existing currently on the mining scenario up there. Is that the main question? What other permits are?
Yeah, no, that's great.
There's lots.
Earlier in the presentation, you mentioned the lithium, the Aero Lithium project. Are there any updates on our copper assets that you want to take us through?
We haven't talked about them much, but I guess similar to what we did with the lithium, right? There's so we own, for those of you that don't know, when we started moving into Sweden in late 2011 for graphite, and then we bought in 2012, we bought out Tech Caminco's Canadian company that owned their Swedish assets. And in that, there were some existing copper assets like Kiskama, which was renowned as Sweden's largest cobalt source actually at the time. It's also got some copper. So it's a copper gold cobalt system. Beautiful IOCG, incredible looking rocks. It's quite a significant deposit actually along that way. It's not particularly big or high grade, but it's only had very shallow exploration. And I mean, in Australia, this thing would have 20 500-meter holes through it. So we also did some grassroots work around the Laudikoski area. We've managed to actually hit some of the most incredible drill core I've ever seen in my life, texturally and from an grassroots exploration point of view. So as someone where exploration is dear to my heart as well, it pains me not to be able to put more resources into that. There's incredible grades of copper, up to 3-4% in boulders around this giant gravity anomaly there, and at surface, you can find veins and things going all sorts of grades of copper and gold. And then we actually drilled out an EM target many years ago for graphite. We accidentally hit all this copper and cobalt and gold in this incredible core. So yeah, we really like the copper assets, but I would expect to do something similar with them, like be able to either joint venture them or sell them. The copper's of high interest, but again, being non-core to our main graphite and battery materials projects, we're looking for a home for those. So that'll be underway soon.
Great. So watch this space, I suppose. So we've got about, well, more than 50 people actually working for Talga at the moment. Can you take us through what they're working on?
Yeah, well, sure. Yeah, it's actually more than 50. Yeah, it's about 60 staff at the moment. The bulk of those are up in Europe, obviously, and they're in up in Sweden. You have a lot of project development staff. So you have engineers, you have people working around the EVA, piloting, making materials, making qualification samples, project development in every way, from permitting, social things, all the way through to design and engineering of things around the chemical side, refinery side. Over in the UK, we have a good sized team. Normally it gets called R&D, but in reality, there's a lot of it which is like quality control. It's interacting with customers, it's refining the products all the time. There's always work underway on refining coatings and feeding those findings back into economical developments. That includes silicon as well. So quite a few people have come up and visited our labs in Cambridge. They tend to learn a lot there. Also, visitors up to Sweden come and see the EVA plant as well, and see how that operates and what's involved and all the technologies and things behind that. Then we still have a smaller staff in Germany on the working on the silicon pilot plant. There's still some graphene production from there that's going out to some customers. And then you've got more admin and finance and IT and market stuff here in Perth. So yeah, I would say that for the size company we are and what we're actually achieving, if you look at everything from the financial side of the of the project and everything else, it's actually a pretty modest amount. Going forward, obviously there'll be growth of that team depending on exactly who's involved from the strategic side, and there'll be some obviously up in the mine site and expansion of the refinery site. And past that, I don't think you'll see much expansion. But yeah, hopefully that explains
Perfect.
what I would hope would come across in the reports better. But anyway.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Well, we've come to the end of our session, so that's all we have time for today. So thank you, Mark, for your presentation and time answering questions, and thank you everyone for attending. And everyone, please keep an eye out for our next investor webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ox.